ideas of what we should be doing or should be working like. So if we talk about that from the perspective of our career, I think a lot of times people have this in their mind that at certain ages they should be doing a certain thing or pulling in a certain income, and that couldn't be farther from the truth of how our careers actually work. So one of the things that I think people need to understand is any expectations that you gave yourself as a child when it came to your career, you really need to kind of put those over the lens or rethink them, because they weren't made in a realistic mindset. So as a young person, you might not have known what it was like to have to go out and work hard and create relationships, nor did you understand what it was going to require from your effort and your hard work in order to get to where you wanted to go. And so for a lot of people, the biggest struggle with them is internally they think about all these expectations that they should have had for themselves. I should be earning this amount of income. I should have this kind of promotion. I should be this kind of manager. I should have this kind of business. And the struggle with those thoughts is it actually ends up being a negative affirmation to them of what's not going well. And therein lies the biggest struggle, is that their expectations are based on not the reality of what's going on right now. And so I think for a lot of us, as we look at our career, we need to come to the acceptance that any expectations that we have maybe should get pushed to the side or completely eliminated, because we're going to find ourselves doing a multitude of different things. I recently talked with a business owner last week about their career, and they started out as a pilot. Did that for almost 15 years as a commercial pilot, and really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, health took him out of that position, and so he had always on the side had ran around with music, and so had this basically almost hobby or second love, and all of a sudden that became his business. And so I think for a lot of people, they think that just because they started in one career path or one industry, they need to stay there forever. And that's just not how it works anymore. It's very common for people, I'd say anywhere between 7 to 12 times, will change their job, change their career as they progress. And so it can be very exciting for people as they start pursuing and going through different things. And so it's okay to start out as, let's say, a employee working in a manufacturing firm, getting promoted to supervisor, and then after 15 years going, you know what? I really don't enjoy this atmosphere. I really want to be a plumber, deciding to go to trade school at night, and then deciding to launch your own business in basically a second career. And I think for a lot of people, the biggest thing that holds them back is fear. The concern of what other people will say is a big one. The other one is the struggle of what if it doesn't work out? That is a big concern for a lot of people, is what if I decide to go down this path of career and it completely blows up in my face? And I think sometimes the way to be able to handle fear is to say to ourselves, let's go down this path of fear and let's talk about what happens. So let's talk about this person who decides to become a plumber after leaving a manufacturing realm. Now, in an ideal world, they would do the Tarzan method. That's where you're holding on to one job and you don't let go of the other job until you're on to the next one. And so in this scenario, maybe they work full-time in their current career, and then at night they start going to the trade school, or maybe they can apprentice with a plumber in town and get on the hands training after they leave their job. Of course, I understand that everyone has different family life and different responsibilities. So again, put that through the context of your own life and know where you need to go with that. And so if this person decides to go all in on themselves from a business perspective, they need to get very comfortable with what's happening in their world, and just accept that this is the new norm, that they've decided to turn off what happened in their previous career and go in a different path. And so I think for that person that decides to become the plumber, the biggest concerns will exist really in their own mind of what could be happening, what maybe they want to have happen, and that could be extremely nerve-wracking. I totally understand that concern of not necessarily knowing where the career is headed, but knowing that they need to go all in on their passion and what's really going to satisfy them with where they want to go. And so this idea of shifting from manufacturing to becoming a plumber really happens slowly over time. And we can't get caught up in this, oh my gosh, well, my buddy who right out of high school decided to get into the plumbing business and now has, 12 different trades people working with him and has this amazing plumbing business. I shouldn't get into the game. The problem is now you're comparing yourself to someone that made a good decision and then stayed with that business over the last 15 years. And so you can't compare your first chapter or even the preface, your intro, to someone else's chapter 15. Don't beat yourself up because, J.K. Rowling came out with Harry Potter and has crushed it on 7 or 8 books and you haven't written your first one. That's not the right comparison. But so many times people hold themselves to this expectation that, I should be successful already. I should be at the top of the hill or the top of the mountain, but I don't want to have to climb up from the foothills. And life doesn't work that way, especially from a career perspective. We have to make things happen one step at a time. I just saw a quote today that there is no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. And I think that there's so much truth to that. Now, you might take the stairs one step at a time, and somebody else might be able to take it 2 steps at a time, and that's just kind of where they end up finding themselves. I'm also, just so you know, for those of you that are on 93.3, I'm also broadcasting this live on Instagram. Let's see, I have a comment that came in and says, the capacity of indifference is crucial with the balance of EQ or emotional intelligence in check, as in every way we are entitled to greatness immeasurable in regards to a pure life. And that's so true. Thanks, Kim, for making that comment. And so when we can remove this expectation that our life should always just stay in one career, it has to go one specific way. So we have a question that came in from Dean out in San Diego, and he says, I feel like someone has got to keep it real. What happens when the closest people around you don't support and care for you and treat you the way a family should, just keeping it to the point? I would say one of the biggest struggles when you have a support group that doesn't support you, you have to really know yourself. And so you have to know if that's really what you want to be doing. Because I think sometimes people are giving us feedback that's valuable. I think a lot of times people give us feedback, it's meant to come from a good place. They are, from all intents purposes, I find that when people give you feedback and advice, they're trying to help you get to where you want to go. And so I think one of the biggest struggles is that if we immediately listen to that question of doubt or those feelings that you can't make it or you shouldn't go about your passion or your business, then what happens is you end up folding too quickly. You might say to yourself, no, you know what? I shouldn't go all in on me. When in reality, you should still stay all in on you. And so it absolutely is true, Dean. This is a very touchy subject because you can't just disregard your inner circle because these are people that maybe have helped you get through college. These are people that have helped invest in your business. And they're the ones after 5 years going, I don't know if you're really able to do it, right? There's a lot of success that happens because of factors that we're not in contact with, and we don't understand the context. And so I want to give a little bit of this. There is a little bit of luck that occurs when certain things come together. And a good example of this is Bill Gates when he was in high school. The luck was that his local high school had bought the intro of basic computer programming. And so he would actually break out at night and was given the key, would go to high school and program in the middle of the night. Like he was obsessed. And so the luck part of it is that the computer industry actually took a foothold. If, let's say, for example, something else shifted, then all of a sudden we wouldn't be here. There was cars that were created that were actually steam driven back when Henry Ford was creating the Ford. And so, again, there was a little bit of luck where the combustion engine really became about. And so as we think about this inner circle, I like the Cinderella method. If the shoe fits, wear it. And so that doesn't always work in that personal in that capacity. And so, Dean, what I would say is, as you listen to their opinions, really understand who you are, understand really where you're willing to go and how far you need to push it. And so sometimes I know people say to themselves, hey, I want to give it 5 years. They kind of give themselves their own timeline of, it's got to make it happen by this particular time, and allow that to go forward. At the same time, understand from a time perspective, it's hard from a business perspective to really cram business to occur in 5 years. If you read the life of Colonel Sanders, the one that founded KFC, he really bounced around from job to job until he was about 65. And he really had a wake-up call at the age of 65 because he received his Social Security check. And he decided that he was going to go all in on this fried chicken business. But that didn't start there. If you rewind when he was about 40 years old, he had heard on the radio a person say, life begins at 40. And so he decided, he was about 40 years old, about 42, I think, and he decided to open up a convenience store. And attached to that convenience store was a gas station. And it was in basically the eastern side of Kentucky, and it was along the state highway, and would sell his fried chicken. And it became so popular that the governor of Kentucky gave him the dubious title of colonel. Now, so it wasn't a true, although he was in the military, he wasn't a colonel in the military. It was just a local title that basically didn't really mean anything, but it was fantastic for him. And so he really jumped off of with this Colonel Sanders notion. But what happened was the interstate was built, and it was about 5 miles away from his convenience store. And so the struggle with that is that here he was starting to make some success for himself, and all of a sudden the interstate totally took his business away. And all of a sudden there was no longer traffic. Some people would still make the extra drive, but all of a sudden these interstates really weeded around his convenience store and his gas station, so people didn't want to go out of their way just to get the KFC. And so at the age of 65, when he received his Social Security check, I'd say that's when he really decided to go all in on his 11 herbs and spices. And he started going restaurant to restaurant and saying, hey, if you decide to sell chicken, send me 10 cents for every piece of chicken that you sell. And it was on a handshake. This was not the greatest of business moves. But over time, all of a sudden, people of honesty, people that probably knew him as well, started sending him money. And all of a sudden, the KFC brand started taking hold. And so when most people were retiring and ending their careers, all of a sudden the Colonel Sanders was literally blowing up not literally, figuratively speaking, blowing up the business of KFC globally. So really he had this amazing run for about 12 years of national to global expansion, and then ends up selling off the KFC franchise. And so it's amazing as we kind of look at that story, where here was one person that a lot of people, I lived in the Philippines, I lived in England. There are KFCs in other countries. It's phenomenal. And so what he decided to do was, despite all the outside influences and even what occurred in business, he still stayed true to this KFC. And I don't think he was obsessed with Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't think he was obsessed with having this, fried chicken globally. What I think he was obsessed with was taking all that failure and being a success. I think that's what really motivated Colonel Sanders to succeed, was to be able to leave a footprint of him in the world. And whatever that footprint was, that was his. He wanted to leave some form of legacy, and it just so happened to be in his 11 herbs and spices. And so as you think about these personal relationships of people that say, you know what, Dean, I don't think you can do that, or I don't know if you got this. I don't know if you got the chops. I don't know if you got the talent. Number one, when they start talking about you personally, that's when I turn it off, because you know yourself. Now, if they start talking about the market, the industry, what you're doing in that space, that's really where your intellect comes into play. Do you know the industry well enough? Do you know yourself well enough in order to make it happen? And you might say to yourself, okay, so that's really good advice. But if they start attacking you personally, like you don't have the chops, you don't have the intelligence, to me, that's feedback. If they're saying I don't have the intelligence, then I need to go to conferences. I need to read trade magazines. I need to talk to other experts. I need to read a book. I need to listen to audio. I need to listen to podcasts. I need to listen to the Crazy Asian on 93.3, or obviously here on Instagram Live. And so by being able to surround yourself with those that are knowledgeable, now all of a sudden you're becoming smarter. And so take that advice that they're giving you and say, okay, what do I do with it to get better? At the same time, when they start talking about business, put that through your filter of understanding your business. So a lot of times, again, people, they're well-mannered. They have good meanings when they're trying to be well-intended in giving you advice. So they might tell you, I don't know if this social media thing is going to stick around. Well, you and I both know that they're coming from a very uneducated perspective, because they really don't understand what's happening in the market right now and really where attention is happening. And so what's going to happen here is their advice to you is just not on point, and so you can somewhat ignore where they're going. And so that really becomes a very powerful perspective, is that you can take their advice and go, you know what? Thank you for giving it. I appreciate you being thoughtful. But in your mind, you go, they don't really understand the context of what's happening here in the world. And so a lot of times people will say something along the lines of this, Sherman, you spend a lot of time on this social media thing. You should start charging people. And I say, no, we're putting the cart in front of the horse. The value is, that's the value first. Is give out the value, give out the opportunity to connect with people, build the audience of people that know you, that appreciate what you're saying, and then, if you so desire, you can figure out how to monetize it. But if you go into the front end of it saying, hey, I'm going to monetize everything that comes out of my mouth, then I think what happens is you dilute your brand, because people then know that you're just there for the money. It's a little bit different if you and I are opening up a shop and saying, hey, here I am selling T-shirts, then that's deliberate. Where on this medium, we're establishing relationships. We're connecting with people. And so that's really where it kind of comes from. And so, again, going back to this individual that decides to go from manufacturing to a plumber, it might take 5 or 10 years to slowly move into that path. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, the expectations of a timeline really only exists in our own mind. And then the big thing about going through the apprenticeship method of slowly going into the plumbing industry is you get a firsthand experience of, do I really want to be doing this? Let's go to Dean's comments here. I don't want to disregard them. He says, I'm giving it to the grave. I love the marathons. I got my vitamins and water for the race of life. Man, never left. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's not a business thing, more how to get Dean to make it through the day and also deal with those ups and those corps on a day-to-day. You're so true. Everyone is human, absolutely. And then Kim says, yes, every failure is a lesson, and when making a conscious choice to make the effort, to put forth an effort in regards to adhere to opinions, we stand in truth in making our future better as a whole. Absolutely. Dean says, I'll value all perspectives. I'll be strong and I'll power through. I appreciate your input. Your value was the reason I know have completed an amazing day. All right, Dean, let's take it slow and grind. Love it, buddy. Sherman is passing by. Glad to see that. Brandon. All right, so true. Kim. So as we continue on this thought process, thanks for the heart attack there, is that I want you, as you're thinking about your career, are you still getting the same satisfaction with what you're doing today? And if the answer to that, like gut check, instantly says no to you, then let's do something different. Now, as you start thinking about something different, I know for a lot of people, they go, well, I don't know what to do. Well, that's a lot easier than you think, because a lot of us have different passions and interests, things that we do that bring us energy, that get us pumped up. And so for a lot of us, what we can start doing is something. And we're going to find whether we really enjoy it or not. And that'll be really profound by being able to take one step at a time in doing something that's really going to be meaningful for our lives. And so it might be, again, this example of going from manufacturing to plumbing. You might start, learning about plumbing and realize, no, it's not about plumbing. It's the housing market. I like building of a house. And so you decide to, stop at that, end that semester and decide to go into construction management, or you decide to completely quit your job and go all in on working in a construction business and really finding passion there. And so for a lot of people, they realize that the yield signs or stop signs in their career life are actually road signs in helping point them down the right path of where they should or should not go. And that is the key. So many times people get stuck in this idea that just because they found out something that they don't like doing, they should stop doing it, or that was a failure. If it wasn't a failure, it was a good indicator of what not to do, just as powerful of what to do. And so in this example, you might find yourself working in one path, and now all of a sudden you're going to find yourself working in a different career, a different industry, and that's totally okay to start kind of from the ground zero again and start moving your life in a way that's meaningful. And so I know that for a lot of people, they have this inner voice that is kind of telling them to do certain things, and they're fearful. They're fearful of what others might say. Dean brought that up. And you can't just disregard it, because these are people that you trust and you admire. And again, if they're talking about your personality, that's when, again, nobody has got a leg to stand on, because you know yourself better than anything. You know what goes on in your mind. You know your perseverance. You know your willpower. You know your ability to bounce back. Though those that give you advice on the industry, the market, what's going on, that can be powerful. Then that can be, they could be giving you some good insights. At the same time, I think a lot of times when they give you that, maybe it's just more studying out for you. You need to know what you need to be doing more